Call the January 10th Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Don't believe that there are any changes to the agenda. There are a couple of additional contracts and a declaration vote that we'll need to take in regard to the sewer break. Announcements.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. Okay, we're going to get an update on the winter storm itself, and then we're going to get an update on the sewer force main failure. So the chief is going to give the storm update, and the sewer director is going to give the sewer force main failure update.
Good evening. As many of us know, we had a storm last Thursday that dropped, had an extremely rapidly declining barometric pressure in it that created a storm surge that was 3.22 feet over our predicted tide, which turned out to be our predicted tide that day was about a foot over what is a normal tide. So we had a flood of about 4 feet into Nantucket. Still wasn't the biggest flood. Juneau was probably bigger, but this particular one left behind came at a time with rapidly freezing temperatures that followed soon thereafter, and created some problems that you potentially created some problems that you'll hear about here in a few minutes. But during the course of that storm, emergency management had made a decision after we started experiencing some extraordinary flooding down in the Washington Street area, Meter Street, Nisbet Cottages, to open an emergency shelter, and just in case we had to evacuate some families. As it turned out, we did have to evacuate at least one family, I believe it was off Meter Street. Those individuals, instead of sheltering, they sheltered with relatives instead of the town shelter. We left it open until 3 a.m., at which point we closed it when we determined there'd be no other people coming through. We went through 2 tide cycles. Second tide cycle was significantly lower than it was projected to be. So we closed the emergency shelter, and we were at that point we were dealing with the other incident that started down on North Beach Street with the sewer, which I'll turn over to Dave. We had we had some flooding in the town building finance department around it. We did close that building to the public and sent employees home. I believe it was about 1 o'clock that afternoon because we weren't sure how high the water was going to come. As it turned out, it didn't ingress into the building, just around it. The Marine Department building did have about 6 inches of flooded water in it, but no damage beyond what was already damaged from prior floods. And the town pier experienced a little bit of damage, but it was mainly just exacerbated damage from the previous storm we had. And then Jackson Point, we had some damage to the floating docks out there, but stuff that we have to jet in new pipes next spring. But other than that, we came through it pretty good.
Thanks, Chief. While David's coming up, I just want to give a little introduction to this. So in the evening of January 4th, as probably everybody by now knows, we had a failure of a sewer force main, which caused discharge into area streets and the harbor. That flow has since been diverted and is no longer going into those areas. Cleanup has begun. Next steps are being planned. We had a public meeting today about the cleanup. David's going to give the overview, and I'm sure he will do this as well, but we really want to take the time to thank David himself, who's been on scene just about since the beginning, and his crew, and the Robert B. Auer crew. They were amazing. A lot of people from the community came out and brought foods, drinks, supplies, just general encouragement. And a lot of town staff has been involved since the beginning as well. So just really want to thank people.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks for having me here. And it's been a heck of a few days, I'll say. I'll try to go through this as quickly as possible, but I know Robert B. Hour's name was mentioned, and my consultants and Clean Harbors. There's quite a few people in the audience tonight, but to put a face to some of the Robert B. Hour's people's name, it's this group of people sitting here right in the row. The gentleman with the orange hat was the main operator, and who spent most of the time in the water, freezing water, 4 degrees, and Damon is the superintendent on that project. So we spent a lot of time together the last few days. So also on hand tonight we have the engineer for the project, Frank Ayotte. The OPM team, Weston and Sampson, is here. The gentleman in the back from Clean Harbors is also here. Richard, he's the LSP on the project, which if anyone has any questions as far as that goes, I'm sure he'll be able to help with that. But to move on with the what happened, I initially thought it started off as a joke because I was just leaving the EOC about 8:15 on Thursday night, and I was stopped by a police cruiser in the driveway and said I needed to go back inside. There was a problem. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then so they sent me back inside, and then we found out the incident, strangely enough, was discovered by one of the police officers responding to an alarm at Station 21. I guess as he made the corner to go to the station, he saw a volcano coming up out of the ground and called and said that there was a problem. I got on scene shortly thereafter and was able to secure the pump system shortly after because there was people on staff who were able to talk to by radio. They were able to shut the pumps down to stop some of the large flow. And then the wheels started to turn shortly after that. By regulation, I'm required to make notification immediately of any discharge of any amount to DEP, EPA, Board of Health, Environmental, Natural Resources, Marine Department. So I started making phone calls about 9 o'clock, standing in the middle of the street down on South Beach Street. From there, luckily, because I was on scene, a lot of the other department heads were able to help push the ball forward to make other notifications that they needed to make for me while I was on scene. We had talked to town administration and everything like that. So 8 o'clock the next morning, we had our initial meeting on the plan, on what had happened. As far as what we had known, by 9 o'clock we had contractors on scene, Toscana, blocking off the road, barricading the road. I did go a little wider than I probably had to with some of the blocking, but at the point when I asked for everyone to come down, I had no idea what extent or what had happened. So some people had said, why did you block off so much? I took safety first, and then so that's why some of the roads were blocked off. Around 12:11, prior to that, I had been talking to Robert B. Hour, Damon, most of the morning, trying to get them coordinated to get over here because there was no planes or boats. About 10 o'clock or so, I sent Damon a text message, said that you need to be at the airport in Hyannis to meet a Black Hawk helicopter to be flown to the island. And the phone call I got back from him was like, what? And sure enough, they all went to the airport, and they got on the Black Hawk helicopter, and 6 of them came over to assist with what was going on down at C Street. They were able to excavate into most of the night to get everything exposed in the force main. What we were operating on was the bypass system that I had been talking to you about over the last few months. The external bypass, because the station is completely empty now and it's under construction. So we had hooked up to one of 2 force mains during the construction project from the very beginning in order to keep the second force main empty and not hooked up so that we could do some inspections on it and certify it and everything like that. So what they had to do is cut in another T, install another valve, and tie into the other existing force main. But the problem was we were missing some parts. And that became the transportation nightmare to try to get a boat here and a truck and everything else like that. So by Saturday afternoon, we finally were able to get the first repair parts on the island by the Steamship Authority. The steamship came through to us, all the local vendors, contractors. There's lists and lists of who helped. So Robert B. Hour's crew immediately got underway with connecting the second force main to the bypass system. In the midst of them doing all the construction, we had a meeting with DEP and the command staff, and I had raised a suggestion of, instead of having numerous discharges into the harbor by numerous outlets through storm drains, et cetera, and overland flows, why didn't we see if we could get permission from DEP to construct a pump system and discharge it into the harbor in one location only? That way we could contain it in one location. We know where to sample in one location and everything else like that. And DEP's biggest concern was screening. And I know you've heard me talk a lot about screening and wipes and everything else. So, and one of the pictures as we come along, we constructed, designed, and built a screener for the discharge that was down behind the yacht club that you'll see coming up. And it worked well beyond any imagination I had. We, to date, had removed 2,300 pounds of screenings from that, wipes, grease, and everything else that could be associated with what's in the sewers. So at 6:20 on Saturday, we activated the pumping system that was all brought in by Miles Reese Trucking. With staff from them, we constructed a pipeline, placed a screener in place, and then went online about 6:20 that night. Within 20 minutes, we had gone down to only one discharge from directly from sewer, and we still had a few storm drains that were still receiving some of the overflow water that was still discharging into the, almost all of it was contained to the yacht club basin by then. We had pretty much stopped the overflow on Easy Street, which was the biggest one that we had. So it had all been diverted to one basin. We go through the rest of the weekend. Construction went on. Once Hour got everything hooked up, it became a slow process because we didn't want to charge a cold line, cold pipe, and stuff like that. So we had to do it very slowly, which meant slowly flooding the line so that we didn't shock it or whatever like that, and check for breaks or check for leaks and everything. So about 10:30 on Monday is when we finally shut off the discharge pump, and the collection system was empty. So we had some time to get everything up and running. That went off very well. Everything went very nicely. Tuesday, between Monday and Tuesday, I had arranged to get Clean Harbors over here with help from the EOC staff and Chief Pittman and the Emergency Management Coordinator and everyone else has been extremely helpful to make some pretty incredible stuff happen to get people over here. So Clean Harbors was on the island on Tuesday. As soon as they got off the boat, they started with a suggested and recommended cleaning solution by DEP of 2% bleach product and securing all the catch basins and everything so there would be no further discharges into the harbor. So we started that, commenced that night, and were able to completely disinfect Easy Street by 9:45 that night with zero discharge into the harbor of any cleaning solutions or any rinse water or anything. You've probably seen a couple of the trucks downtown. There's some extremely large vacuum trucks on the island from Clean Harbors. So we didn't lose a single ounce of any cleaning or any other product on Easy Street Basin or anywhere else we've cleaned. To date, we've cleaned all of Broad Street up to South Water, and we've started up into the truck lane at the steamship. So decontamination and cleaning is moving along very well to the point where EOC should be starting to open up some roads as soon as tomorrow morning. So there'll be some more discussion on that possibly going along. Now the real tough part starts is to find out, to get the excavation going, to find out, we're going to do a forensic examination to find out what happened, why it happened, where it happened. We know of potentially 3 separate spots where we may have a rupture. We don't know yet until we get into the street. The thing that is slowing all of that down is the entire power system for the island comes through that street. There's 2 power cables from National Grid. Verizon has truck backs in there. The entire communication system runs through that street through fibers. So the taking apart and trying to find out what happened is going to be an extremely delicate operation and can only be performed by certified and qualified personnel, by Clean Harbor, and other contractors that are certified for electrically operations. Almost all the excavation that's going to be done near any of the conduit work will be done by what's called hydro excavation. It's done by a giant truck with a vacuum. What that will do, there'll be no digging with shovels or anything like that. We'll actually suck all the soils out around everything that gets done. We'll first initially expose the surface, and then we'll start going on with the structure. I don't know if there was a picture of the truck, but that's the hydrovac. That's one of the largest trucks I'd probably ever seen out here, and it's filtered and it's an amazing piece of equipment. So they'll be starting hopefully within the next day to start doing all the excavation work. As we go forward now, with engineering surveys of roads, of structures, of everything else that's in the roadway. That's a picture of our discharge container that was constructed by one of my operators, Jared Strang, and his brother, Ernie Strang, from Reese Trucking, in the yard within a matter of a few hours. And like I said, it worked remarkably well for what the needs were. The outfall points, there's no further discharge into the harbor at all. That was stopped over the weekend. The volume, as we had estimated, based on flood levels and flood flows and everything like that, it was advertised. It was put into the press releases of the paper. Was 2.7 million gallons, and that took into a lot of consideration. This wasn't just strictly sewage that was into it was flood water as well that it was getting in through storm drains and everything else. So it was a little bit of everything. Containment efforts were still underway. We're securing the area so nobody can get through. Blocking it off with fences, security fences, personnel. There's been personnel on scene 24 hours a day since. We started testing protocols on Monday morning. We have a licensed operator going down every day in the morning and taking 6 to 8 samples in strategic locations as prescribed by the Marine Department or Environmental Department and DEP requirements. As soon as we start getting results in, we'll be able to see what's going on down there. The C Street pump station construction during this whole thing, the interior construction didn't stop. The crews that were there continued with working inside the wet well and everything else that's going on. So it's things are moving along well. The teams are in place. The support from Libby and the command staff and everyone else has been absolutely phenomenal. Until we know, I can't even guess what happened. The forensic investigation will tell us. Weather certainly played a part in it. But we're going along now. We're on the other force main with complete success and no concerns or worries, except now we're going to get another 3-inch rainstorm on Friday. But we're going to be watching that very, very closely. So it was a logistic nightmare with the weather. That's about it. Unless there's anything else, you guys, I don't want to go too long. I could sit here and talk all night long about it, but it's been a challenge. So.
Thank you for everything
you.
that you've done.
The support, I have had texts from certain selectmen. The support has been just unbelievable. And like Libby was saying, the people that were Damon and the crew have probably never eaten so well as they had during the construction. They had people showing up every day with casseroles, soups, more food than you could ever ask for. They showed up back at their rental house, and there was a big, huge pot of kale soup on their porch. So, the people just stopping by, the operators and the police and everyone else, with just bags of groceries or gloves or whatever it's been unbelievable. The local support has been just beyond imaginable.
Yeah.
I also just want to mention that DEP has been pretty amazing as well. We've been on the phone with them a lot, and we're going to meet some of the people that we haven't met yet in person tomorrow when they're here doing a site visit and a meeting. So there's going to be a lot more interaction with them as well as we move along here.
I don't know if you want me to just go right into the quick Shimo update or whatever else is going on. Or
Sure. And I don't know if the board wants to ask any questions about.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to say that I think the most important thing to the community is going to be to understand why it happened and to do everything we can to put in place measures so it doesn't happen again. But
Yeah, we're going to look at it's going to be a
I
complete
know
forensic
that you all
detail.
are
So.
on top of that. So,
But it's the worst part of it is the amount of power that's in that street. We just have to go. It's going to be
Right.
so slow, but it's going to get done. And just to quickly go on, the Shimo Nantucket Harbor project is still moving along. However, Peter's crew, who was the Shimo, the crew one that was doing Vesper Lane and all that, they were pulled off for this emergency. They were brought into the area to help. So it was their crew. So that section of the crew hasn't worked at all during the week, but crew 2 has started in the Shimo area. They've been out on Berkeley Street. The one thing that they're encountering is 18 inches of frost in the ground. And they have a machine called the zipper. That's what they usually zip asphalt with to take and make their trenches. They're having to zip the dirt roads to get in and work to eliminate a lot of the stuff. So that's been going along well. Like I said, C Street project didn't even stop anything going on at the C Street project. That kept going on through the whole thing. And the Surfside project is moving along as anticipated. With the cold is slowing down some stuff because we can't get concrete delivered or poured. But one of the other things that during the whole process going along is when we lost our flow going into the plant, it caused the plant to diminish on its flows. And that way we didn't have any bacteria or anything growing at the plant. So we had to do a balancing act trying to save the plant by hauling tanker trucks, bringing fresh waste in from Sconset just to keep that plant alive. So there was a lot going on at the same time. But my crew, I tried to get some of them here tonight. I think a lot of them are home sleeping or whatever like that. But the crew, the DPW crew, Marine Department, everybody has been just beyond helpful. So, and I got to thank Libby because I think we've been communicating up until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, just keeping her apprised of what's been going on. So. It's I know I've woken her up a lot lately, so thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
thanks.
Chief, are you going to do the Children's Beach boat ramp update?
Children's Beach project, that the boat ramp, it's still underway. We're running into a delay because of the transportation issues, primarily in the storm. There's some large slabs that have to be brought over on a boat. And the project was supposed to be done by, our permit expires January 15th. And we have applied to have made contact with the Army Corps of Engineers to get an extension, a week extension on that permit. And it sounded from the conversation that it's going to happen. But they're continuing to work. They just finished up just a few minutes ago, actually, and they have it dry now, pumped out, and they're removing the old ramp, and they'll regrade it, and then as soon as they can get the new ones over here, they'll put them in.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chief. The next announcement is that town offices will be closed next Monday, January 15th, in observance of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. DPW is going to be having some public information sessions regarding the future sidewalk improvements along Easy Street and Broad. And those are scheduled for Thursday, January 25th, Thursday, February 22nd, both from 6 to 8 here in this room. That's it for announcements, but Madam Chairman, there is the one item we had to add to the agenda that wasn't foreseen when we were doing the agenda, which is the emergency declaration vote.
I thought you wanted to do it under contracts. You want to do it now?
Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. I just nervous about getting it done.
I've got it right here.
Okay, thank you.
This is the public comment portion of our agenda where someone can speak on anything not otherwise on our agenda for discussion. Hearing nothing. The new business will be this emergency declaration vote.
Sorry, Madam Chairman. I just want to add something to this public information session. Based on most recent events, we're going to add South Beach Street to that same discussion, since the street is right now planned to be completely reconstructed. So I just want to add that, so folks that are affected by the sewer break, please show up for the January 25th and February 22nd sessions regarding the street and sidewalk reconstruction for South Beach, as well as EZ and Broad. Thank you.
You know, February 22nd is during school vacation. It might be really, really quiet. Just might want to rethink that date. So do we want to do this emergency declaration under new business?
Sure. I think school vacation might actually be the following week,
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
but it is getting.
It's during school vacation
into-
off island.
Yeah.
Do you want me to read this?
Sure.
It is hereby declared that the catastrophic South Beach Street sewer force main break occurring on January 4th, 2018, affecting service to 4,000 homes comprising the integrity of the streets in that area and resulting in discharge of untreated flow into Nantucket Harbor and emergency rerouting of critical equipment and the resulting need for redesign, remediation, and all incidental and related activities and repercussions constitutes for purposes of General Law, Chapter 44, Section 31, a catastrophe, whether natural or otherwise, that poses an immediate threat to the health or safety of persons or property, and the Board of Selectmen hereby declares that the town manager is empowered by this vote to authorize expenditures for all purposes required to carry out the town's obligations with respect to this matter to such degree and in such amounts as she deems to be necessary.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Yeah, approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. I meant to send this to Florencia, but I never did send her an email. On page 2, under number 4, it was the discussion about the ballot question. I said about halfway down, it says she believes the word whatever should be stroked, and I believe it should have been stricken. So that was the only thing. Did anyone else have any edits? Someone want to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of payroll warrants and treasury warrants.
Move their approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Pending contracts, we had a few additions that came in last minute due to the incident with the sewer. Does anyone have any questions?
Move their approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Citizen departmental requests. We have a change of manager request from Orrin Moore. I believe the applicant's here, but does anyone have any questions?
It's pretty
Someone wanna
straightforward.
make a
I move
motion?
approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Nantucket Coastal Conservancy. There is a final version proposed by the Conservancy.
Yes, Madam Chair, Deanne Atherton on behalf of the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy. And this is a follow-up to the discussion we had on December 13th when we asked you to consider voting to put this non-binding ballot question on the ballot for annual town election in April of 2018, and we were very pleased that you informally agreed to do so, and we all said that we would work on revising the language, and we appreciated your suggestions for language revision. And since that time, we have communicated with the chair and the vice chair to try and make appropriate changes. And this is the language that we are is our final revision. And essentially it is, should the town of Nantucket take appropriate actions in a time of climate change and rising sea level to preserve Nantucket's coastal beaches as open spaces? And what we're asking you to do is to take the formal vote tonight. We understand the next steps would be to have this reviewed by town council, just to make sure that it's in order. And we did speak with the town clerk, and we understand that in terms of what happens next, that once you take a formal vote, I guess Erica will notify the town clerk's office, and the process will go on from there. We submitted a cover memorandum to just explain the changes, so I don't think that I will repeat that unless you have any questions. Probably the most substantive change is that we have modified the question to pertain to all of Nantucket's beaches rather than just to town-owned beaches. And we believe that this is consistent with the science and makes the best sense.
Does anyone have comments?
I think the changes get at some of the questions that came up at the last time we were discussing. And I think it puts it in context of why we're voting on it now, why we're discussing it.
I think they're all good.
Yeah, I appreciated the change to appropriate actions rather than whatever actions. I think that was a wise change.
So if there isn't anything else, I'd make a motion that we approve the putting this ballot question on the warrant. On the
Is there
ballot.
anyone else from the public that wanted to say anything?
So I made that motion. I don't know if you want to ask for a
Okay.
second.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure
second
before
it.
we
Okay, thanks.
moved forward.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We'll have it reviewed by town council, just to be sure.
And I think it's going to have plenty of support. And the proof will be in later. The follow-up is what will matter.
We have one public hearing this evening in regard to the general fund budget.
Madam Chairman, I don't know if we have anybody to speak, but this is an annual public hearing that we've been having on the budget. As the board will recall, you endorsed the general fund budget at your meeting on December 20th, I think it was. And our next step is to go to the Finance Committee in a week or two.
Well, this is a public hearing. If there's anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this matter, now is the time. Hearing no comments, we'll close the public hearing. Do we need to take we don't need to take a
don't
vote?
know.
You think you already
Action,
did.
Okay.
Yep.
Town manager's report.
Okay, thank you. So the 2018 annual town meeting warrant articles. This is possibly a little bit messier than it would normally be because of other issues going on. But I've got a kind of an outline summary here to go over with you, and there's a little bit of outstanding items, and there's some input that I need from the board. So just to go through this, and you've seen quite a bit of this already, but I tried to sort of highlight the outstanding items. This is the third outline we've gotten so far for the 2018 ATM warrant. The first, so what I've kind of tried to categorize these into sections. So we have the annual articles. They're pretty well all listed there. The first 13 or so are just the usual. And when we get into 14 that's highlighted there, what we had been talking about were some capital, just calling them capital standalones. These would be individual articles for specific capital projects because of their expected cost and because they would likely be debt exclusions. So the first one would be the Old South Road corridor improvements. Second would be the Marine Department renovation. And if the board recalls, so back to the Old South Road corridor improvements are estimated $14 million in cost. The Marine Department renovation is 3.4, and we have confirmed a $1 million grant from the state, which would offset that number. Stormwater improvements is 3.5. And Brian and I were talking just before the meeting. What was the other one? I didn't.
Is it Sparks Ave, the sidewalk, which was part of the complete streets that Capcom added?
Okay, so this is an issue for the board. Was it, how much was it again?
The total estimate is $1,084,000. We believe there might be $400,000 of grant funding available, but we haven't confirmed that.
Okay, so I know that the board hasn't seen really a totally complete capital program committee or town administration recommendation on all of the capital projects. Capcom met today and finalized their report with their recommendations. And I was talking to the chairman or emailing the chairman late today to see if he could maybe come to your meeting next week to review that. And subsequently, they would go to FinCom. In the meantime, though, we're scheduled to adopt the warrant next Wednesday. So Brian and I were also talking about how we would handle then these standalones or whether we'd have another standalone. And what we said was we have a bit of a timing, sort of logistical issue with the ballot questions. So if these standalone, if the board is okay with these standalones, I think we'd just add them as warrant articles and ballot questions. The sort of thing you haven't really heard about yet in great detail, the Sparks Avenue item, we could discuss next week, and that maybe could, if the board wasn't comfortable taking a position yet, could potentially be included if FinCom were amenable in the FinCom motion to the general fund capital article, contingent upon whatever funding we are going to end up with. So I think we can work it. But just wanted to point that out.
Are there other potential standalones coming from the Capcom report?
I don't think so.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay.
No. The remaining articles here, I think, are all pretty well. We've talked about them already, and then we have other selectmen-sponsored articles, and then we categorize them again into other appropriation or finance related. So there's been a little bit of modification and changing around of items as we've been developing the warrant. We had talked early on about potentially rescinding the enterprise fund status of solid waste enterprise fund and the island home. However, I think on the admin finance end, we're not really ready to do that yet. There's a lot of setup that needs to be done. And
You convinced us.
I know, and we're looking at it. We've been talking to DOR, and I don't believe we can delay implementation if it was successfully approved, at the April town meeting. And because it's something that we talked about very in that meeting, it makes sense to me, quite frankly, to do it. But I think in order to do it correctly and not rush, it would make sense to do it at a subsequent meeting so that we have time for proper implementation.
Okay, good.
I want to go back, to item number 1 under other appropriation or finance related. It's to establish a special purpose stabilization fund for substance abuse prevention efforts for the local option marijuana tax. So we've adopted that local option tax. However, town council is recommending that we be a little more specific regarding the, is it possible to pull up the draft warrant also? Because that's where his comment is. I think. Is that it?
25.
No, that's not it. Keep going.
Page 43, maybe? Is it along? No.
Well, okay, it's somewhere else. So the comment basically is that
I think, is it the note here, percentage can be modified, but must be at least 25% of receipts?
It's that, but also regarding substance abuse programs, what would those be? So in order to get the funding out of this special stabilization fund, you need a 2/3 vote, but you also have to say what, specifically you're going to use it for. So I don't know if the board had specific thoughts about what types of substance abuse programs, or would we sort of have we basically need a policy as to what these funds would be used for.
Is this the most efficient way to get the money out? Let's say we pick an organization, because I read that maybe identifying some nonprofit, that could change over time, and it just seems to be an administrative burden to do it that way.
It's probably not the most efficient way to get it out, but this is how the law works.
What about, could we add it to the money that's normally appropriated that the CRC reviews and gives out to appropriate organizations?
To the human resources or human services budget? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yes.
I think we appropriated $450 this year.
It would be another source from other than the general fund and it could even be earmarked if we need to do it for substance abuse. I'm not sure we do, but it could be added to this.
This is basically saying 100%, if I'm reading this right, 100% of the local option marijuana sales tax will go to this use. So wait, one thing, am I reading that correct?
Yep.
So if it's 100%, then what we should be thinking about is, approximately how much will this raise? And is that, this will be tying our hands to that percent and to this purpose forever. So if this be, if we have 6 of these in town, like Aspen's got 14 of them now, all doing $2 million a year, approximately. So you have to look and say, what is that number going to be? And should we be spending that much? Or, it could go into the general fund and, like Don said, be used for that purpose. So I just think we have to be careful.
But can we just send it to the general fund?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
I guess I didn't hear that.
No, it's got to be appropriated for specific purpose.
If you want to be able to appropriate it for specific purpose, such as substance abuse prevention, then we have to do what we're doing here. If it goes in, we cannot segregate general funds for specific purposes. It's all money comes in. The general fund can be spent for any purpose as approved by town meeting. So
But do we have to have it as a special?
Like if this
No,
goes away,
this
the money's still
direction,
gonna come
this
to the-
direction came from us prior.
Okay.
I understand.
Just
But if we,
This direction allows you to direct it exactly where you would like to spend it and
Right.
and have it come out at a town meeting. If it just went into the general fund, there's no guarantee about where the
Exactly.
dollars would be spent. So that if that's the goal of the board, then this is the mechanism to do this.
but I think, while we were at heart saying this was a worthy cause for it, that was before at least I understood the administrative process. And are we creating something that, as Matt said, generates so much funding that we may have preferred to use it for another purpose?
In a different manner. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I felt there was a pretty strong positive response from the general public that they liked the idea of having this fund that was earmarked specifically for mental health. And I vaguely remember John telling us that once it's not forever. If we set a percentage and it's not correct or we have to change it, we can change it in the future. So it wouldn't be forever.
You can change the percentage, and it doesn't have to be 100 to start with. It just has to be at least 25. So if we got, I don't know, a significant amount of funds, the amount above and beyond 25, say you set it at 25, would go into the general fund or be fall to free cash.
So do we understand the required specificity for this? I mean, do we have to name an
well,
organization?
No, you don't name an organization, but
But what's in there is not adequate, so what's adequate?
Well, I'm struggling right at the moment because I thought that town council had a comment, and I thought that I had included it here, but
We can
in
bring
light
it
of
back some more
everything,
time.
I wasn't able to double check. So why don't we hold
Yeah.
this one for
Good.
next week?
Okay.
The comment, you think he has the comment on the next item about the moving houses, and he has a comment on the side.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking that there was.
That if the town wants instead to make direct grants to individual homeowners, it talks about that can go through a nonprofit.
Yeah, that was a different article, but I thought it was looked like that, but I guess
we'll
didn't make it. So
next
we can
week's fine.
hold that. Okay, so moving on.
Well, just one comment on that. I think we should be thinking about it. We have no projections on how much it will raise. We have no projection of the need. Sometimes, things can sound good in theory, but you have to actually flesh them out. And I don't think we've done that yet, but.
I just don't know. Can we know how much there will be in receipts? We don't know.
Well, you can make guesstimates.
We could look at other towns and
other businesses, and there's industry standards. I mean, there's, everyone who's opening trying to open a pot shop here, they know they have guesstimates, and they're, getting their mortgages and everything else on them. We can be estimating what they'll be doing. So, I think you have to have some, and it can be a ballpark, but and that would tell us what our number will be. But I haven't done it. I can do it off the top of my head here, but I haven't sat down to really do it. I'm not sure anyone else has. That's my only point.
So we'll talk about it next week.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see, moving on here. Revolving fund into which fees for roadway-related work would go, and then work completed by the town down the town schedule. I think we talked about that a little bit the last time. My little note there says needs to be written placeholder, and it's been written now and is in the draft. And so basically what this would be is we have a fee for when contractors want to open a road. So that fee would potentially go into this revolving fund and be used later to repair the road on the town's schedule, so that the road repairs happen more consistently and more comprehensively. And if there were a different town agency, like say the water company, doing a water main project, which would later require repaving of the road, they could deposit a certain amount to cover that work into the revolving fund, and we could then use it when it was time. That's the idea, correct, Rob? Yeah. So we've written the proper articles to accomplish that. Next is the authorization for this. Okay, we already talked about that. Now, the highlighted item, number 5, establishment of special fund to be used to help private property owners demo houses subject to demolition. Okay, that's where there is a comment there from town council. That needs a little more work, it sounds like. Can you go to that? Yeah.
It's 44.
So, sorry, I don't know if anybody had a chance to review that comment, but what he's basically saying is that we can always appropriate funds for the purpose of demoing structures, including privately owned structures, as long as we can establish a valid public purpose to do so. You'd have to go through a process where the homeowner would have to grant the town a license agreement, be subject to procurement, all that sort of stuff. So, this came from a board member, and I'm not sure we totally thought through exactly how it would work. I think the idea was that somehow funds be made available in advance, perhaps, but it sounds like that's either going to have to go through some sort of a grant agreement process, or if we were able to make the grants through some kind of a nonprofit avenue, or alternatively, if we wanted to do direct grants to individual homeowners, we'd have to have a home rule petition, and that started sounding kind of complicated to me.
I think what I found interesting, as an alternative, the town could make grant funds available to an existing nonprofit pursuant to a grant agreement. That seems like the easiest way to do it. My thought on this was to have matching funds or give some incentive so people just don't abandon their homes. and leave the town on the hook for the full cost. So my thought was if we put the funds aside, it would actually encourage people to do the right thing, and it would save the town money. And so
It's an easier cleanup.
it's easier to do it
Well,
at the beginning.
It's easier to do it before it's a cleanup.
Exactly, or at least get the big stuff out and let the house fall over a little bit and pull the whole thing out with insurance. Get the septics out or get the septics and the stuff that's in the ground out that ends up on the beach and in the wash. So I just thought, is there a way to do that? And I just think I don't really, as long as it's simple and easy, we can wait another year, or we could do it to a nonprofit. I don't really have
I like where you were going with
Preference.
it, and I think we're all on board with the intention behind it. I thought John's comments were interesting, and like you said, maybe there's another way to achieve the same thing. I think we should flesh it out a little bit more and maybe hold off for next meeting. But at the same time, I do like where.
But we could
it's
leave it in
important.
and pull it
Okay.
if we're not ready.
Well, we have to, between now and next week, a fair amount of work would need to be done.
What has to be done to do it?
So we'd have to pick one of those three.
Is this, Libby, is this the kind of thing that might be discussed a bit in the coastal resiliency plan? Is this anything like this? part of the scope of
Potentially,
works?
yeah, we could maybe work out some sort of process maybe in there and with some kind of criteria as to how and when the
And then maybe bring
funds-
it back to this group once.
Yeah, and they
that's
could
been-
maybe that's a better route to go. Work it
Pull
in.
Make it part
Yeah.
of it. That's
to
a
a
good
plan.
That's a great
Okay.
idea.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Next, zoning and general bylaw amendments. So zoning, Andrew's here. Welcome back, Andrew. I haven't seen you in quite a while. We've got. Well, I'll let you explain the zoning. We've received them from planning, and I think there are 10, including Harbor Place, right? And Harbor Place, I've got a question on.
You have a question?
Well, I,
Do you
for
want, we
the
can run
board.
through all of them. So have these been, these have come from the planning board? Have they voted to recommend them to the Board of Selectmen?
They did.
Okay. Have they had a public hearing?
No, and because there's not really a warrant yet.
Okay.
And
Okay.
we don't want to have a hearing if you don't include them for
all
any
right.
reason.
Okay.
Which I'm sure you're going to include
right.
them. We are having a public hearing on the citizen articles tomorrow because those are guaranteed to be included
Okay.
in the
Okay.
warrant.
So the zoning articles came to you in a separate email, and I'm not even sure it's in your packet.
No.
It was a real scramble to get the packet out on Friday, so it's in your email, and they're not in the draft yet. Do you want to quickly just maybe?
As a group, I can tell you that, I mean, there's far fewer than there usually is. There's only 10. They are, we were tied up with a number of other things, so we don't have very extensive articles this year. There's really a few properties kind of on the edges. I mean, I don't want to say they're not significant. All zoning articles are significant to somebody, but they tend to be cleanup articles, that are consistent with the master plan. They're mostly map changes. There's a few technical amendments, but again, it's fairly low number here.
So in the email I have, there are 8, but maybe.
I think Leslie's email said there were 2 you were still working on.
Right. And which are the technical ones?
Okay.
So I have a email from you to Vicky that says cleaning drafts of articles that were included.
That's the real estate.
So this is December 21st from Erica to us. Actually, January 3rd, but I'm looking at something
January
from
4th.
from Libby
Oh, and
to says attach a draft ATM warrant for review. And then there's 8 Word documents.
They're all individual attachments.
Yeah.
Yep, this is one of them. So this first one that we're looking at, this is where we changed zoning in the country overlay district for open space to the lowest intensity district. We've been doing these for a number of years. The first group is essentially an area in Esther Island. We've had a conversation about this before, where these are town-owned properties, and we're not trying to encourage any further development out beyond the bridge. So this is moving those into the lowest intensity district. They're currently in VR, which is a half-acre district, and this would move them into a 3-acre district, so essentially it'd be one parcel sort of fused together. The next group is Pulpus Road, which is part of the Moores End Farm, and again, that's owned by the land bank. The last group is on Sheep Pond Road, where there's been erosion. So again, that's going from a 2-acre to a 3-acre, reflecting the activity there. And Massasoit Bridge Road, these are part of Moreland Management District. So again, they're going from Lug 3 to Moreland Management District to be part of that overall area. So in all cases here, properties are going from higher density to lower density. And those have never been controversial. So the next article there is changing R1 to, and actually this is going to change to R5. So this is the property that includes, oh, I'm sorry, no, I take that back. This is property that is currently R1. It's non-conforming commercial use. This would change it to one of these commercial districts. We're not sure which one to recommend yet. This is on the corner of Pleasant Street and Cherry Street in the Mid-Island area. Yes. The next one, this is currently a residential property at the corner of Airport Road and Old South Road. The proposal is to move this to a commercial zone. At this corner, we have been working with the property owner to get additional land to make the turning lane work at this location, and also to restrict the number of curb cuts. That would go hand in hand with this particular article. There's commercial zoning directly across the street, so
there would be an agreement with the property owner?
that we would ask that the Board of Selectmen eventually enter into prior to voting on
Prior
this.
to town meeting?
Correct. It was, and it was continued because there wasn't an agreement in place, and there wasn't any commitment to that, which there is now. The next article is the Harbor Place Wilkes Square area, which is the rezoning of an area which is currently in the RC district, which is being phased out to the commercial downtown district. So this covers the area of the electric company, the NIR, the parking lot, and makes this consistent with its areas basically on all sides. So
I'd like to, if we can take a few minutes to discuss this one. I'm just recalling what you all went through when you had the zoning changes for what was Richmond property and the development of the MOU around that time, and getting all that done prior to town meeting seemed like a heavy lift. And I know just in our conversations at our work group, the the zoning is really, the change of the zoning from what it is currently, and I understand it's part of the master plan. From my understand from folks, in the planning arena, that this hadn't been implemented until there was some direction on what was going to happen in that area. And I think in the conversations we've had at this board, there was some, at least I expressed some reticence on moving forward with this zoning article at this time till we had a clear concept to share with the public.
I mean, we had talked that this would go hand in hand with an MOU, and currently we're at the very beginning stages of the transportation consultants that we've hired. And it does seem virtually impossible to get an MOU done before April 3rd. But
I guess I'm not of that opinion. The rezoning of the Richmond property was submitted prior to any MOU. An MOU was developed prior to the final vote. The final vote wouldn't have gone forward unless the MOU was signed. And I think delaying this is a mistake. What we're talking about is including it on the warrant. If by April we don't have an MOU in place, I think the planning board is looking to you to develop that MOU. I don't understand why in 2 months that couldn't be developed. I've seen a draft that I worked on that before I left, and I don't know where that is.
you've seen a draft?
There was an outline of various points that would be.
Outline, yeah, but not
would be
was there
covered.
any verbiage or we just saw an outline. We had not seen any draft.
No, it's an outline that needed to be developed into a draft that then would be responded to by town council. But in far less time, you put an MOU together regarding Richmond. I don't understand.
Well, we signed that the day of town meeting.
Yeah, if we're going to use it, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
If we're going to use Richmond as a victory and an example of how we did things well, I would say that would be a mistake. I think that was not done well. I don't think we had our fiscal impact analysis done before. The one after, I don't think went very well. It was contentious. We had town council just gave us an MOU for Berlin, and Berlin did it the way that I was saying I thought we should have done it. They had the fiscal impact analysis done by the town prior to doing negotiations. You have your leverage at one point. You do your negotiations when you have leverage. You don't give everything away and then ask for it back later. And so, so in the case of Richmond, I think that we have not attached numbers, and we did not, and we still have yet to know what the impact was, what benefit has come to the town, what cost went to the town, and so if we're going to bring articles, if any department is bringing articles, I think we should understand what the costs are, what the benefits are. And I just don't think we did in that case. And I for one, don't want to be promoting something or even putting something to the town meeting that I can't understand the costs and the benefits. So that's where
I understand, and through you, Madam Chair, I'm disappointed to hear this because the planning board was willing to file these articles on its own, and hearing this now is a little, it's disconcerting. The planning board has an opportunity through the citizen process to file articles to move forward.
But why would the planning board file an article when we won't have if we don't have the MOU ready?
Because the expectation is the MOU can get ready. I don't understand why it can't be ready in the time.
Well, we've had pretty lengthy discussions about this within the last couple of meetings. Mm-hmm. We also discussed it at our Harbor Place work group.
Right, which I'm a part of as well.
No, yeah, I mean, you may not have been, I don't think you were at that meeting, so I don't know if you got a report
Perhaps
on that. We actually discussed it with planning board members, and they were going to, consider our comments. There was pretty broad, I think, we didn't take a vote or anything, but there's some strong feelings that in the absence of a concept plan or some idea about what we're going to doing, it would be hard to make a case for this at town meeting, and that the zoning is linked to what happens down there in the eyes of the voters.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And the night that we talked about it, I brought that up for all articles, not just for this one. I brought it up for all articles, saying that we should understand the cost of the benefits first, and that we should get this stuff in plenty of time with that information. And I don't want to be doing it at the last minute. And so, yeah.
and I'm worried that putting it on will be very negative for the final outcome for the project. I think it would hurt it personally. I could be wrong, but
I think it was a little bit different situation with Richmond because by the time we got to that point, there had been so many other proposals and people were ready to move forward with approving that zoning change for Richmond. I think that we need that MOU done and then need public outreach for a couple of months. So that people understand exactly what's happening here, because there's a lot of questions out there. And frankly, there's a lot of questions right here. We don't have a complete understanding of everything that's there now as opposed to everything that can be there and what people want to be there. It's certainly not, I don't think, anybody being against this concept. It's just about time.
Okay.
And it's just a discussion about whether there's a real way to get this done in time and get it done right so that it's moving the project forward in a good way.
yeah, in the absence of being able to make a case to the community before we ask for zoning change, I think, taking that position shows us more as advocates for something to have happen down there than trying to delay it. And it didn't the Richmond take a couple of town meetings to get the zoning changed?
There was a different proposal that happened the year before.
Yeah.
But I guess there's been a lot of work leading up to this.
Right.
This isn't brand new to anybody. This has been a planning exercise for years and years now.
So that's an argument for making sure we do it right. So.
Well, it's an argument, I think, for making sure we do it. So.
And then what is it? We don't know what the it is. We don't know what's going to happen there.
Well, that's what the MOU would bring together. It would talk about what rights people have, when they can exercise them. The zoning bylaw could come into effect at a later time if it's not ready. The point is, I mean, there isn't a commitment yet about that there's an interest in even doing this. I mean, if there's not, we should all know, and then we don't have to waste time on it.
I think that you've misspoken. There's not, I think I don't know if we've taken a vote, and we'd be happy to do it, but there is there is a consensus that we want to do something down there. We've been very actively participating in a work group, and we've, Libby's assigned a staff member to really focus on this, Janet. So I think there's, we are making a strong commitment to it. And I wouldn't want anybody to think that not putting this on is any way showing a lack of commitment to it.
Yeah, we'll definitely put a lot of time into this so far.
I know about the time.
I know you've
spent a lot of time on this, and
we do have this on an agenda next week.
Okay.
With you.
Oh, is that right?
For the executive session. Yeah.
Okay.
With town council, and to start talking about how to put together the necessary information that we need.
Okay.
And maybe the information exists. Maybe you guys already have it and you can bring the file over. I mean, some of this might just be, a lack of communication, but maybe not. So we've got to find that out.
Well, don't we have to make a decision tonight about whether we're going to add this? And we've had a discussion tonight about this article. I haven't heard anybody say, yes, we need an advocate for putting it on the warrant. I'd prefer that we didn't delay it till next week, because that's the week we have to adopt the warrant, and we're just going to be coming from
No, I'm not saying we should delay it. I'm saying I'm in favor of it too.
In favor.
Philosophically, I like the design. I like the idea of urbanism. I like putting more density downtown. Philosophically, this is right in my wheelhouse. What I'm missing is the financial analysis of it. I'm missing the missing the positives and negatives. What's, how is that going to work? And so I think that's the part, if we have that, that'd be great. But if we don't have that, we need to do it. That's the first thing Berlin did. And they did a very good job. I don't know if you've read the thing that town council sent. It was 30 pages and it was very specific and a lot of benefit going back and forth. And I feel like sometimes we don't get to that level. So
isn't this what the consultant is doing now?
I don't think so. I think the consultant is designing a parking garage.
I thought part of that was to provide the financial analysis, however you're looking for.
Well, of a parking garage. I'm talking. You're proposing a zoning change that has fiscal impacts, various fiscal impacts, and various impacts on the town that should all be understood. And I think that's the part. The garage is one aspect of an entire development.
I think the zoning change doesn't have the fiscal impacts. It's the program that will have the fiscal impacts. It's not the zoning. The zoning allows development to happen now. It's commercial zoning right now.
So it's commercial now.
Correct.
What would it allow? What was the maximum it would allow, and what would the value of that be? In that whole area.
Based on
the commercial zoning in place now, what is what would be the value of that? It's RC2.
What are the uses? What are the assumptions of the uses?
That's what I'm asking.
There's all kinds of commercial uses that are allowed.
That's what I'm asking.
There's residential uses that are allowed.
Right.
So there's all kinds of, which set of assumptions are we to use?
How about we start with the ones that you've been using in the planning department for this project, of the from 1 to 2, comparing it now as it sits, with the most intense uses, compared to what it will be, in the MOU.
There's all kinds of individual factors that come out of that, depending on what the size of the parcels are, how much land is dedicated to streets. I think throwing these questions out without, what are your assumptions that you want us to look at? I don't know. Basically, our long-term plan is to phase out the RC district and to adopt the commercial downtown district.
Yes.
For all of the area. That's been adopted throughout the downtown. So we're doing the analysis. We have a consultant on board right now. And whatever things that we need to agree to can be included in the agreement signed by the town and the developer. So, I don't know what you're talking about, basically.
We could go back and forth. I'm having a hard time understanding.
Well, I think you're asking to come up with a whole series of assumptions. I don't know what they are. And then you ask for, come up with an estimate on this and that. And then it's like, but what are your assumptions?
No, but you're asking me to answer your question. What I'm trying to get to, what are the assumptions that you guys have made? What can happen there now as it is? What assumptions has your department made of that?
The basic assumptions are the overall ground cover and basically the math provisions that have been given to you. What does RC allow? What does the CDT allow? And there's different ground covers and everything else depending on what the lots are.
Right.
But there's 3 existing property owners now that don't have to work together, that don't have to provide public benefit. And that was the point of this whole exercise, to get something that is a public benefit. And especially since we started this whole process, there wasn't the focus back on the ferries again. So it's not the zoning, it's the actual program that's going to be developed there. So I don't know what
I'm just concerned that this is kind of, if people are watching this, the conclusions they're going to draw. I think we're all, I hope we're all kind of excited about this project. I think what some of us are saying, we need to have some time for some due diligence to make sure it's successful. I've heard board members say we need to do some community outreach, and personally, I don't think we should have some artificial pressure on an MOU. I have a different view on the complexity of that. I go back to what I put forward earlier, I would suggest that we not add this article to the warrant.
I think this entire project is an incredible opportunity, and I want it to be understood that I want to move forward with it in the right way. But we won't even have our report from Desmond until May. So it's really hard to make sure that we're moving forward the right way with establishing an MOU and making sure all of the right pieces are in it. I would be more inclined to say that if we can get this ready, that I would personally be okay with a fall town meeting. Of course, I may not be sitting here, so I might be putting that on all of you. But I mean,
That's a good idea.
I think that might be the best compromise to show commitment, but to actually allow us the time that's really necessary.
And so I just think it's a good thing to do. And I think we all want this to happen. Hopefully as much as you do. And we just need some more time to communicate with the public.
Well, I'm happy to hear of your commitment for a fall town meeting, so
Absolutely.
that's great.
Yeah. Well, we already had our commitment earlier. Remember, you said I'm going to hold you to that.
I
remember.
Okay.
So, do we want to make a decision on that article tonight, or we
I do.
could wait until next week?
I would prefer we do it tonight, so we don't have to because we have a lot on our plate that we've deferred. So I'll make a motion that we not add this article to the warrant.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. Next one.
Are you, okay, sorry.
Are there
You're
more?
still going through, I forgot.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and before we get on to the next one, my only concern if we're moving to a fall town meeting is that we identify next week what has to be done, we assign people, and we get it done. Because I've been involved, and Andrew has too. I've been involved in government long enough to know that sometimes it's summer and nothing happens, and then we're back here 2 months before special fall town meeting, saying, "Oh, none of it got done again." So, I mean, if we make a commitment, we really have to make a commitment to getting the work done necessary to understand things. So, anyway, that's
Yeah, I'd like to shoot for like an MOU to be done by June.
with all and that would be what I'm talking about. Like, you can't do all this stuff at the last minute, having things come in like this.
But I think the idea is to sit together next week and put together an outline of what we need and how it's going to work.
And who's going to own it?
And, I don't know if I'll go out on the limb here, but I think it's important we communicate to the owners our commitment to this project, even though we don't know exactly what it is. And so I would, I'm trying to think of a motion that might be acceptable to everyone, but I would make a motion that we agree to work in all ways possible. Well, I wouldn't say with
By any means necessary.
No, I won't take that. With appropriate measure to negotiate a MOU with the parties that will result in the development of Harbor Place for the highest and best use for the community. Waiting for a second
I'll
here.
second it. And we could do that next week too, but if we're going to meet about this anyway. But I'll second it. That's a feel good thing.
So we're committing to negotiating for the best and highest use possible for public benefit.
Yeah.
I seconded it.
Okay, any further discussion?
Well, I think it's a hard, I don't know. I mean, I think if we're going to leave it at negotiating for the best and highest use in regards to public benefit, but it doesn't feel quite right to do it without really knowing what you said, what it is. And I know there's shape on it, but I mean, a good sort of a feeling good, yes, committed to a great project, but I don't want to overcommit.
No, and I'm just trying to send a signal, to be quite honest, to the owners who, as Andrew said, are, it's not just one owner, it's three owners that have very different, I've learned, very different, not agendas, but perspectives. And so I personally think it would be some potential benefit there.
I mean, I support it because that's what we should be doing anyhow, and that's why we're trying to get the work done so we can ensure that we did that. So I don't have a problem saying that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
Okay, the next article is Sparks and Williams Lane. It's an area that's currently zoned R commercial. The proposal is to move this to residential R5. It includes property that the Boys and Girls Club recently purchased, and they are in favor of this particular change. Something they're actually seeking to develop for their own employees.
Okay.
Next, again, part of the phase out of residential commercial is to move some properties that are along Orange Street into ROH. They're largely residential or inns, which are allowed now in ROH because they're within the limitations of the downtown. Next. In Sconset, we have been in discussions with the Sconset Trust, and there are properties that are currently in residential that they have asked as part of their village center to be put into the commercial zone. It includes the casino property, and it includes the Sconset Trust office, which are located opposite of the village neighborhood district. So again, this would move those from the old historic to the village neighborhood district in Sconset. This is a single property which basically contains a warehouse which is not allowed in CN and is allowed in C-Tech. So it's moving from commercial to commercial, generally to a less intense commercial district.
And did you say this was one use, or
It's one property
okay?
on the edge of an existing district.
Okay.
And when we did the zoning change, it should have been included with its neighbors.
Okay.
And again, in order to get the warehouse use that's currently there, it needs to go to C-Tech.
Yeah, I'm looking for the maps. There's maps. I've seen maps on some of them, but
Should be a map. I know Nathan
Is that
produced the
all of
maps
them?
quite a while ago.
there's 5 maps on not mine on it. From the 3rd, I have 5 maps.
It's CN to C-Tech if you go.
Yards.
That's a map.
I see that. Nah, I don't think it's all right.
Right, and there's two. There's a technical one which removes just, I think, some minor things, parts of the bylaw. No, Leslie was working on that, and I don't know that that's been sent to you yet.
So we'll have 2 more to review for next week before
Yes.
we adopt it. Okay.
Now there's room for another one. I'm just kidding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
So do you want to think about them? Or you good with including them? Or,
I'd make a motion that we include the 7 that we just reviewed with Andrew.
Matt,
I'm trying to look at the maps again.
do you want to just wait and do this
Yeah.
next week? Because we have to review 2 more anyway.
Yeah, if we can get
Would
it in the
that be
packet
okay,
next week
Jim?
with the maps, with all 7 maps attached to it, that's a little easier.
Jim, are you okay with that?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Yeah, I think most of them are fine, but.
Okay, so we'll do it as a full package next week.
Okay, so moving on to other general bylaw amendments. There was a little bit of discussion about seeing if the HTC Sign Advisory Committee would want to put forward a suggestion about further regulation of outdoor televisions or indoor monitors, and I didn't get anything from them, and apparently there was some earlier in the 2017 sign regulation amendment, but I don't think it addressed televisions or indoor outdoor monitors. But anyway, I didn't get anything from them. Now, the next item, the snow removal. Okay, it's not highlighted, but it's number 3 under the general bylaws. I think we're going to recommend that we try something else before we put in a bylaw about mandating removal of snow by private property owners. And the idea that the DPW director and I briefly talked about was we don't have much of a written policy right now. So our thought was that rather than sort of going full on and doing a bylaw amendment, maybe first what we do is prepare a list of all the sidewalks that the town takes care of regarding the removal of snow and ice. And that way people can understand where we don't take care of things. And that would then be private homeowner or property owner responsibilities. So I think we just want to try a little bit of a different approach at first. So if it's okay with the board, we'll do that one. Home rule petitions. There's 3 sort of redos that were approved in prior years. We talked already about rescinding the Nantucket Mosquito Control Project. That article is now written. Town council is reviewing it. And we've got 2 proposed home rule petitions from planning. And I didn't even read them. Do you want to go over them?
Right, so there. I know Vicky has them.
I can't remember.
Those have been sent. So a home rule petition is required when we transfer land from one conservation group to another. And here there's certain properties owned by the land bank, owned by the Sconset Trust, that we would need to, if we are to transfer them, remember these are open space parcels already. We're not trading buildable parcels for anything. This is just changing the custodian of these particular properties. So the properties in question are properties that, again, I've had some discussion with the Sconset Trust. They've expressed an interest in overseeing them. They're in isolated locations where it's very difficult for the town to get to them. They're all under the control of the Board of Selectmen right now. There's some discussion that just these other entities would be better custodians for the particular parcels. They're all open space. They're all in sensitive areas. The ones on Low Beach and Tom Nevers are used by the public. Obviously, any of these would allow the selectmen to keep easements and restrictions, which we've done with all our transfers. So,
And this has been your practice over time.
it has.
So I think it's, yeah.
It is a triangle. And I do have some additional properties that didn't get on this. This is an earlier version. The list that I sent you the other night has some addition. I know.
I've
Probably got some.
don't know where that is. But Andrew, just quick, the triangle, we have a license with them right now, right? Yeah. Yeah, so it's sort of already in their trust,
Right.
kind of. So, any issues with that? Do you want to include them or put them on for next week?
Fine, we can include them.
Okay.
I mean, you want a motion?
Or some kind
Do you
of
wanna vote?
consensus to include?
I think there's a consensus.
Yeah, okay. So we'll get those finalized. Mass General Law acceptances. Okay, we had on here before the parking benefit district. So that is an article that's been written, and there was some discussion as well. I'm going to jump ahead a little to another potential article that we talked about establishing as some kind of a separate parking commission. That can be addressed when and if the board really wants to take that on through this article. So just, can you go back to that article, Erica? So this basically authorizes the selectmen to establish one or more parking benefit districts. So this gives us the authorization, and then we can set it up as we are ready and able to do so. Okay, go back to that summary.
So you want, so
sorry.
sounds good to me.
No,
So,
okay.
can we add that one too? Okay.
All right, real estate related. I had one in there that we already talked about 264 Publius Road and the Public Cemetery, and Andrews submitted 6. So last I looked at them, there was additional info needed. I think I saw an email that had some of that info in, but you want to just quickly go over them? I think they're in the warrant, Erica.
Right, and those are all related to the home rule petition. And the one extra home rule petition I forgot to tell you about is 264 Pulpus Road, because it's been used as a cemetery, needs a home rule petition as well, because that's an exchange of property. So, and that's not my article. That's, I believe, the cemetery committee's article.
Yeah.
And who's the exchange from and to?
I believe, I don't want to misspeak on this, but I think that the adjoining property owner there's been sort of an encroachment with a fence for years and years. So I believe if they've done a study, there's no burials in that particular area. And what they're doing is picking or adding an equivalent area to the existing cemetery, which will give them more room and so it's basically an exchange between the abutting property owner.
Okay. It'd be nice to see that on a piece of paper. And
I know there's I think Rob, they've talked to, and I know
They'll have a survey.
there is a proposal. I believe they've done a search, the underground search, to confirm it.
And this is authorization.
It's authorization.
So it's, I
yes.
mean, yeah.
But anytime you convert a cemetery property, you need
Right. But there's time for this stuff later.
Right.
Okay.
There would be a map prepared, correct? There is one now.
and the map and the information, because what happens if we get a year out from now, 2 years out from now, or 5 years, and then we say, oh, but town meeting voted it. And so, and hopefully the swap is fairly even and it's a no-brainer and it's not a big deal. But if the swap isn't even and people, and we don't see a map and someone says, oh, town meeting approved it, just do it, guys. Then we do it and then we look dumb after. So it's better to make sure the due diligence was done before.
Right. Typically, the finance committee motion, ties it to a map too.
Right.
So.
So if we have a map, we'll send it around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can get me that, I can put it in next week.
Okay.
That would be great.
Can do that.
Do we want to go through the other real estate?
It's
A couple of them were related to the home rules.
yes. So yeah, I think it'll be most helpful to go over these. I mean, they're with the map, so you have the maps in front of you. So I'll have those for you. But they're all pretty.
It's pretty self-explanatory when you do that half the time.
Yeah, it's true.
90% of the time.
So they're probably okay to be in, but we need to look at the maps next week.
Yeah, they're.
Some of us want to look at the maps.
I want to look at the
I know.
The maps
I
are
like maps. I like pictures.
No, we like pictures. All
very
right.
illustrative.
All right, so I guess we're dealing with those next week. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll just finalize that.
Okay, so lastly, we have ballot questions. So the town meeting and election are all on the same warrant. So next week, you would be including ballot questions for the debt exclusions. And we've just talked about a fourth one. So we'll talk about that one next week again. And Brian and I were talking earlier about the timing. I guess we already just talked about that. And whether or not, potentially, if we can't determine or aren't ready to make a position on the debt exclusions, we could do them on an election warrant that would be separate from the town meeting. And that is fine to do. It's just going to require separate voter registrations. That's usually the reason why we, do it all.
So the only question is the sidewalk one?
It's the Sparks Ave sidewalk one, but there's also, I guess I forgot to put it on here, the capital exclusions. So when the board last talked about those, you guys wanted some more information about that, and that just has not come back to you.
Yeah, so that would only be the other outstanding issue is the capital exclusion, which we're still working through based on some of the changes that you agreed with in the budgetary process that could alter what the capital exclusion might look like, but that's the only other outstanding exclusion.
Will it change what the article looks like, or just the amount?
The amount.
So we can wait for that. It'll come through a FinCom motion, right?
We would have to have for the ballot question, you would have to have the actual dollar value that we were doing. I was looking at the law.
So we have to have the amounts next week.
If you were going to put the capital exclusions on the same, I don't want to offend anyone, but it's not really that big a deal to do the election warrant on a.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So you'll have another updated warrant for next week with some of the information that we talked about coming to you as well. Next on Town Manager's Report, we've got our Culture and Tourism Director. She's going to give an update about the Harbor Place Intermodal Transportation Center feasibility study. That's a mouthful update. This is the second update that she has given. Janet?
Good evening. We've had a meeting on December 19th of the Harbor Place Work Group where we reviewed the base design, the work plan, draft MOU elements, and a draft zoning article. I have set up interviews, at that same day on the 19th, I set up interviews for Andy Hill from Desmond with Paula Leary from NERDA and Mike Burns, the transportation planner, and they've both provided Andy with information for his design. Mr. Fredericks and I have met to discuss public outreach strategy and content, and we continue to stay in touch with each other about those issues. In terms of research and data collection, I had a conversation with the mayor of Newburyport to review the terms of agreement between the city of Newburyport and the developer of their new parking garage. She was very helpful and asked me to convey her interest in assisting Nantucket with any questions that we might have moving forward.
Maybe she'll need to come for a site visit.
Pardon me?
Maybe she'll need to come for a site visit in July.
I'm sure she would like to, yeah. I collected data from Valet Park and forwarded it to Desmond for review and analysis for the base design. And then I reviewed again the PowerPoint presentations that Mr. Fredericks had presented around town in 2016, 2017 for a broader understanding of what the ideas for the whole Harbor Place development will be. And have that information if you'd like to see that again. Works in progress, obviously the MOU between the town of Nantucket and developers. You had your discussion on the zoning warrant article. Desmond is working on the next iteration of the base design. And I've been working with Greg O'Brien, who's from the owner's side of the project, on the preparation of a summary report about the history of the project and a public outreach plan. That's back in his ballpark right now. Last week, I sent a list of suggested interviews to Mr. Hill. Followed up with a call this week. I'm still waiting to hear to see when he's coming back, and so that I can set those meetings up for him. The next steps are to hold a meeting, or to set up those interviews, and to hold a meeting on the 23rd of January. We set the agenda at the last meeting, which includes a review, update probably on the MOU. We'll see the next iteration of the base design. Not sure what we're going to do about the zoning article now, and then talk about public outreach and planning.
So I think we can defer the item D.
Item D?
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't sent out the public notice yet in anticipation of this conversation. Any other questions?
What's the intent of public outreach at this point?
Well, I think we need to, in my mind, we need to wait until we have something to show people to get some feedback on about what a garage would be and do and what that intermodal center would be and do. That was my understanding. And when I left the meeting on the 19th of December, it was my sense that that was not as urgent as it had felt prior to that meeting. So I think we really don't have anything to show or any bees to stir up until we've got something to show.
That's kind of.
But his consultants proposal had public outreach at different stages based on the level of development. So really, what he's doing now is a little bit of a public outreach, going out and interviewing people. So
That was part of the initial outreach, was for him to be interviewing people here about what was needed in that design. But I think at some point it behooves us to have feedback from the public to see what the response is.
Can we I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't think that we'll have a draft MOU to discuss. I think that it may be more samples of MOUs from other towns, but we won't have something for the work group to discuss.
So perhaps I'll change that to MOU update, MOU discussion update.
yeah,
Something
that's
like
fine.
That.
That's good.
I'll run a
you
new
have
draft
something
by
now?
Libby.
Can we now? You had a review of the terms of the agreement, the new report. Can we get a copy of that? Is that?
I have what basically happened, it was all put into a purchase and sale agreement between the town and the developer.
Okay.
And I found a copy of that online, actually.
Okay. If we could see that, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the collected data from Valet Park. Was the data including the parking lot and the valet in front of the valet numbers in front of the town building? What data did they give you?
I would have to look back at it again. I think we only asked for the data at that site.
Okay.
But they have a good relationship. The guy at Valet Park knows Andy Hill really well, so they were going to speak directly with each other.
All right. But that's public knowledge. We'll know how many cars are going in and out. That's all out there. That's good.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else?
No.
Actually, Janet, is there discussion about, I suppose, especially in light of what happened last week, is there discussion about stormwater runoff and what's particularly with the parking garage? If there's anything creative that we're going to be doing?
At the last meeting?
Or any of the meetings? Is it a part of the discussion at all?
We've only had one meeting of the work group, and I believe that someone on that interview list will be talking about stormwater runoff with him. It's certainly come up in what's happened since in December and January. I've had a conversation with Cormac Collier, and that was a concern of his as well. And he shared with us some Chapter 91 information about the site as well. I didn't put that in this report because I did this before New Year's.
Yeah, I think it's a significant concern in that area once you have surfaces, and there are cities and towns that require zero runoff for developments like these. So I think without understanding, and hopefully we will understand what our infrastructure is like in the area, what they would do with so many hard surfaces, with such an increase in a hard surface area, what will happen with the stormwater management. And I think there's opportunities to be creative, but I think it would be a priority.
There were just some very basic schematics shown of different garage designs that would fit on the site that they've proposed to grant to us, and how many spaces you could get in different design concepts. It's very, very beginning.
And it's something I suppose I bring up now because
just keep bringing it up that it's a concern.
Yeah.
I think Cormac actually raised his hand if I don't mind taking a public comment.
I think Libby distributed Cormac's email to all of us, so we know his questions about Chapter 91.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Cormac Collier from the Nantucket Land Council. Libby, thank you. I wasn't sure that you had distributed it, but you distributed the email.
She did.
Very important point for you all to consider as you go through the MOU, and actually as you're spending town dollars right now through staff to actually work with a private property owner on having a parking space area where they're already actually required to have a parking area per the existing Chapter 91 permit. Let me just reiterate that for the people at home. The Chapter 91 permit that they got in 2009 requires them to have a public parking lot in front of the Stop and Shop. So if they remove that and build on that, they still have to provide a parking area, probably of that magnitude. So if they're providing land to you to manage, operate, and maybe even put money into building a garage that they're already required to do per a separate state permit, I think we need to put a very significant hold on the process right now and figure out why or what sort of participation the town wants to do in terms of spending public money right now, just through staff time, helping facilitate what they're already required to do. I know that they're going to go above and beyond, and that's probably where the separate additional public benefit is going to come from. But again, I think that's got to be done now. I've never seen this happen before in terms they have to do something per another permit, and the town's getting involved helping facilitate it happening. So, thanks.
Well, I think there's a lot more to it. And however all of this happens, there will be an entire new permitting process, including Chapter 91, where the public benefit is a huge piece.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's almost why I think that Chapter 91 and the public benefit discussion has to come into the process now.
It's very relevant.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janet.
And I think the Chapter 91 highlighted for me the importance of our side understanding what the baseline is. What are the public rights, and what are the public rights? What are the public things that are happening now? Okay, then if we're going to change it, how do we ensure that at least those remain, or maybe those and a few more? And I think it was that wasn't brought up to us a month ago, and then you read the Chapter 91 license, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute, this was in 2009. Why is that not being told to us now? So I just feel like I just think that there's fact gathering and information in a baseline if you're going to if you're going to try to understand something that just highlighted for me. We weren't ready yet.
Well, I think what it did for me was just I took it back and reviewed the outline of the subjects, which was which we had distributed and discussed at another board meeting here, which was abide by all the laws, regulations, and to me. And I applaud Cormac for doing it. But if I were involved in the MOU development, one of my first charges to town council would be tell us everything that is required currently that we've agreed to, the developers agreed to, that are whatever it's Chapter 91, and that really forms part of the baseline of a conversation with anybody. So,
but now to improve our process, one thing to think about, though, should we be hiring town council to do that, or should that be the burden of the town department bringing the article forward? Is that our burden? Is that the planning's burden to understand what the baseline is and what the change? So when you
negotiate the MOU, you decide who's going to pay what fees, including legal fees. So.
No, I understand, but if we say we're going to do this, and then go, town council, tell us what everything is. It should be the other way around. We should know what everything is before we go to do it. I kind of look at things sort of differently.
We're not going to do anything yet.
No, I understand, but I'm saying as a process. I'm not talking about this specific thing.
I think we have to rely on town council because there could be 25 other things out there that we aren't aware of and we should be aware of. And I don't know what those are.
Andrew, I think has an answer.
But I think it's...
I don't want to have an extensive discussion about this, but this is getting a little misleading. I mean, there's analysis to that Chapter 91 that needs to be done by further professionals to determine what those numbers are. It's not the entire parking lot. It's the parking lot subject to Chapter 91. And there's no number that's associated with that. So there's a lot more analysis to do, and I think you're jumping into places or there's an insinuation here that somehow we didn't know about that. We know that there's certain amounts of public parking that are associated with this.
No, I understand that. So, what I'm saying, though, is that it says that has to stay in place. It shows if you look at that license, it shows the low tide mark, it shows the high tide mark. It talks about how often the outflows have to be cleaned. It talks about reports that have to come every year.
Right.
There's a bunch of aspects of the Chapter 91.
And there's earlier Chapter 91s as well.
That went prior to that, exactly.
And for other properties. So
I understand, for that property and other properties. And with my question, I had questions on that, which I've sent to Libby and she sent to Jeff, and I'm going to go see Jeff, and we're going to get it back. But I just think, sort of Chapter 91, just because we think that's a state thing, so therefore the state will take care of it. Well, these are actually public benefit for us. So we as a town have to be, on the ball and ensure that they stay in place. The state isn't going to come and monitor these for us. We have to monitor them. So my question was, who monitors them? What are they? I'm still trying to flush that out. Are we getting reports from everyone we're supposed to? Is everything being followed the way it's supposed to be?
Right.
I'm digging into that because I'm not so sure. And I want to make sure that they are, not just on this instance,
Right.
but on all of them, because it's really important. If these are, look, an example of this one in particular, if the walkways are fixed, they have to extend them toward the water and make them larger. That's kind of interesting. I never thought of that. But if they touch a walkway and fix it, they're supposed to make it bigger. So there's a lot of detail, and I'm not sure what the repository of that detail is, and who's paying attention, who's making sure that when something happens, it happens.
I do believe the right-of-way committee was putting that all together as one of their projects.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway. Dave?
I think it's probably a good idea that we as a group decide what level, what role we're all going to play in this. I think that's part of developing, say, the ground rules for the negotiation. What are we going to discuss here? What will come under the purview of a executive session? Because otherwise, we're going to be, dipping back and forth. And I think if we create some rules for ourselves and follow them consistently, whatever those rules are, I think my personal view is we'd be better served.
What kind of rules are you suggesting?
I don't know. I'm just saying we have a conversation on this board about how is it going to be, how we're going to, who's going to be accountable, who's going to be working on the development of the MOU, the role of the planning department, the role of town council. I think that's the conversation that we should have here. So, and then what our role is and how we're going to, who we're going to delegate to, and what level of detail we're going to get in on each of these subjects. That's my own personal view. So.
Dave Fredericks, I represent the owners that have been referred to. I didn't come tonight because I didn't think public comment was going to be allowed. I came just to kind of listen to the discussion about the zoning and listen to the update. Very beginning of this, I put on a 30-minute presentation, which started out with, it's probably the single most complicated site any of the people that are involved in this have ever looked at. I think we had 3 or 4 slides on, as an example only, Chapter 91. I don't think the owners in any way are trying to hide from their responsibility. I think there's been a lot of misrepresentation by taking a single piece of something and reading it out of context of many other elements of Chapter 91. There are lawyers who spend their entire life doing nothing but working on Chapter 91 and quite often get lost in the complications of it. So it is an issue. We take it seriously. I do think there's a lot of things that have to be talked about, and I think there's a lot of homework the town should do to become educated. The owners are trying very hard to invite a big community with a lot of opinions into the development of private property. And we're doing the best we can to do that as openly as we can. So I urge the board to get educated and kind of look forward to the next several months.
Thank you. We're working on it.
Ready for
We're
the
done
next
with the update.
item? Okay. All right. Human Services Director is here to go over some, what we're going to try to make a more regular report about quality measures for our Allen home. I think there was something in the packet and something else came in later. The life safety maintenance thing. I don't know if they have this.
They do not.
Okay.
That was just a building update. That's not tied to this.
Oh, that's, sorry, different thing.
So the last time I gave a report on our quality rating and some of our quality measures was February of 2017. So much of the background information is the same. The system is the same, but I'll try to do a quickly brief overview. Each facility is rated through the Center for Medicare and Medicaid on a 5-star quality rating system. So you get 1 out of 5 stars in 3 areas: health inspections, staffing, quality measures. Each of those has different cutoff points, different benchmarks, and different ratings per category. The amount of nursing homes that are participating, as well as each of how those each are participating, consistently fluctuates where those cut points are. So there is never a flat benchmark that says you have to have 30% for the entire year. Every month, these things get updated. The below slide bullet, unfortunately, was actually not updated from the February one. So this will give you an idea on this next slide. So February of 2017, the last time I gave this presentation, we were only a 2 out of 5 star facility. In May, we became a 3 out of 5 star. September, we were 4 out of 5 star. And now, as of December 31st, we have become a 5 out of 5 star on the facility rating. So I gave you the little history since the last presentation, just so you can see how we have gradually bumped up our rating system throughout the year. Our health inspections are considered average, 3 out of 5. We had just had our regular annual survey as well as our life safety survey in November. Life safety was accepted, and our annual survey as our plan of correction, which had 5 different deficiency tags on it, was just accepted yesterday. And so once those get fully processed through the state, they will get uploaded, and that data will be in here, and then it will get reflected on that. So we could potentially look at an update on this from possibly next month all the way possibly until the next quarter ending, which would be the beginning of April. Staffing is the same. We were a 5 star back in February. We remain a 5 star now. I'll discuss that a little bit farther later on, but one thing that happens as well with staffing is it remains pretty stable throughout the entire period until you have another health inspection, and then they take the snapshot of 2 weeks of your staffing, and that also gets updated. So we should see an impact of that or a change in that at the absolute latest by April. And our quality measures, which is the basics of this presentation, we did go from a 2 to a 5. So health inspections, they take the last 3 inspections on record, not just the last 3 over the year, because by February of 2017, we still had not had our regular inspection. We were kind of outside of our window. They come usually every 9 to 15 months. So the health inspections that are a part of this rating are actually the ones from 2016. This will have to be updated at a different point in time, but that data remains until they've had another one. The only other time it changes outside of those 2 inspections is if we have what's called complaint surveys. So we're required to report certain things to the state, and then they can determine based on the severity of that reporting that we're doing whether they should come on site or do a desk audit, and they can tag us based on those things. So any type of fall with major injury, incident that resulted in a resident's death, those things can change this rating throughout the year. Staffing. Staffing's an interesting one. There is still a lot of discussion that comes into play at the state level of how to truly account for staffing. They do 3 different levels: nurses, and then they break out RNs from the LPNs in the nurses, and then CNAs. As you go through, there's 2 different layers into the report. And like I said, this is only a snapshot of a 2-week period. They do have a new system in play right now. It's called payroll-based journal. And we have to, every week or every payroll, we have to upload our staffing statistics. And so we upload how many hours of each category that we have. At some point in the near future, that data will be tied into this reporting so that you don't have to wait for the 2-week snapshot every annual survey. I don't know when that will actually roll out, so at least you'll have a more updated rating system. So this is the breakdown of our staffing comparison. Some of you may be aware of, I believe it was December 16th, there was an article in the Cape Cod Times about nursing home staffing levels. And the executive director of the Long-Term Care Commission, that's ultimately a nonprofit advocacy group, recommended that most people who are looking at nursing homes and looking for placement of their loved one in a nursing home should be looking at facilities that are staffed above 4.2 hours of care per resident resident per day, and that's of all CNA, RNs, and LPNs. And they should be looking at RN level staffing of at least 0.75 per day. We were specifically named in this article, which is why I reference it, as the only facility in the entire state that met that 4.2 hours. We were actually, based on the average of what they did with this data, they looked at us as a 4.4 hour per day of our staffing. One thing to make note of that, though, as wonderful as that is, and as great publicity that is, and most Richard Malott, who is the executive director, is very adamant about staffing levels, and better staffing levels are immediately tied to better quality measures. The one thing that I need to note about that is sometimes data can be deceiving. I think the main reason why we are the only facility that meets that is because right now we are only at 35 out of our 45 beds with no reduction in staffing levels. If we were fully at capacity, we might not have been a facility that met that requirement. I also think that while he is accurate that staffing is tied to quality measures and how well they are, I think the residents' acuity level of that you're admitting into the facility also ties into that. So when I show you the chart, I can kind of reference that a little bit into explaining what I mean by that. We report on 24 clinical measures, at least a minimum of quarterly. Other residents, when they have a significant change, they have to be outside of that. And so out of those 24 measures, 16 of them are considered critical enough that they tie them into this 5-star rating of whether a facility is performing well or not. So this information gets updated monthly. And so they're broken out into two different things: short-term residents, who are usually only there for under 90 days, or long-term residents who are not anticipated to be discharged to home. All the items in blue are tied to the 5-star rating, so all the short-term measures are included. I have been able to determine through some conversations, I didn't have the answer to this before, but everywhere where it says the data is not available, that simply means that we did not meet the minimum criteria of how many assessments we had in that period in order to be have any type of value there. So we require at least 20 resident assessments for those 4, and we did not provide 20 resident assessments. Ultimately, that's because our short-term census is so low that we just simply didn't produce enough required assessments to get any valuable data. So they just didn't include this at all.
I think we've discussed this before, but can't you do that manually?
No, because how they determine the numerator and denominator changes so much. I could tell you how many out of how many there are, but it would not give you the correct percentage to compare against the Massachusetts and national average. So it would be a misleading number.
But I mean, there must be some who were rehospitalized after a nursing home admission.
Well, I could tell you we had one. But because we don't have 20 assessments, that one person without having a 20 assessment denominator I can't provide. I could give you the percentage of our facility, but you have nothing to compare it to from a state average.
You have one, and you have 35 residents, so you can get a sense on how that compares to other standards in the state or the country, and that seems like a pretty low number.
Not necessarily. It would be a skewed percentage because the Massachusetts average, they're basing it on the 20 assessments. So their 20 assessments at 11% and our 1 out of 35 at that percentage is not a comparable data source. You can't compare the two.
I'm not saying compared to the 20. I'm just saying compare the absolute numbers and whether you think those make sense or not.
Okay.
So here's a question: if they had 20 assessments and 5 of them were rehospitalized, are they at 25%? Is that where the math comes from? Or?
It's their entire system. It changes whatever the main denominator is. But ultimately, yes, that's how they determine. For instance, those who self-reported moderate to severe pain, the 37.5%. We actually had 4 residents that were 4 out of whatever it was at the time. But the 75% is because we had a little close. We had 3 out of 4. So you can't, it's really hard to even compare the two quarters.
Gotcha. So
Just because the data
3 out of 4 gave
changes.
us 75. Gotcha.
Yeah. So even though the 75% looks extremely astronomical, the level of those residents' acuity that we added, so whether they were end stage renal failure, cancer, certain types of dementia related or falls with fractures, a lot of times you want those people because they're the high rehab, but they would trigger in this category. So sometimes it's a catch-22 of where you're going. So because we admitted 3 out of 4 people that had high severe pain based on what we were caring for them, that percentage jumped extremely high. So it's sometimes really hard. The 25% for antipsychotic medication is actually one resident of ours, and obviously the denominator is what it is. And so that one resident that we admitted within that one period jumped from 0 to 25%. So it looks like we had a huge increase, but when you actually break down the numbers and what the comparison is, it's only one resident that we admitted.
Yeah, 1 out of the 4 to give you the number, but which is 1 out of the 35 that are in the facility. I gotcha.
So it's kind of hard to provide comparable data to know, is that one resident based on our 35 beds versus the 1.9% that somebody who has 150 beds, are we doing as well as they are, or are we not? Right. And the 2 lines for each of the categories, the top line where they exist is for what's actually related to the 5-star rating right now. And so that period is April 2016 to June 30th, 2017. The bottom line, I wanted to give you the most up-to-date of where we currently were at, and that's the last quarter, which is it's just July to December of 2017. So you can kind of see where we've even changed. Obviously, it's a smaller period, so the denominator is a little bit different, but you can still get a feel for where we're at. And then the long-term measures, it's ultimately the same thing. So all the red items are the areas where from the 5-star rating to our most up-to-date quality measures are areas that we have a need to look at why we've increased when we should be either maintaining status quo or getting better at that. And almost every single one of those except for one is related to one resident change in our acuity levels in our facility. So based on, it might not be the same resident,
Right.
but because of one admission that we had, it completely adjusted those numbers. So sometimes our quality measure rating doesn't necessarily mean that we're not doing a good job. Sometimes it just means that we're taking people with high acuities that are sicker or at the end of their stages of life. And again, there's a different period rating for the 2. So one is a much longer, it's almost a year period, or it is a year period, and the other one is just a quarter.
So is there any relation between the payer mix of Medicaid, of acuity between Medicaid and skilled nursing Medicare patients?
No. Usually the skilled is usually what impacts the short term the most. The short-term data the most. And the Medicare is usually the individuals that have the high pain, any of those.
Oh, okay.
And they're mostly on the short-term measures that those get pulled into.
Because we have less skilled nursing
Right.
patients than I would think most other nursing homes because of the critical access status of the local hospital.
Right. We only have 2 right now, and we usually maintain 2 to 3. Most facilities, and that's about 6%, I think, of our census right now. Most facilities have at least 25 to 30% of their census as these Medicare people. So that also kind of plays into it. So they have a higher amount of people that can kind of saturate that percentage number, and we have a very small amount.
But wouldn't those residents tend to be higher acuity?
For Medicare, yes.
Okay, so
Yep.
since we have less, I'm just trying to understand
It doesn't particularly matter because once they've hit a certain point and they're skilled, or if they don't have a qualifying stay and they're mass health, but they've had a significant change in their acuity level or an event that has occurred, they don't automatically go to Medicare. So somebody could be mass health with a very high acuity, and it could be higher than somebody that is on Medicare. So it's kind of, without doing a patient by patient assessment, it is hard to say that all of the high acuity people are Medicare, I think would be a completely inaccurate statement. Most of our, I would say, the only statement that you could make is our high level rehab is our Medicare, and that has no impact on these at this time. And I believe that's it. Any questions?
I just wanted to get a little update. Last time, a couple months ago, we approved a contract for contract labor because you'd had large retirement or turnover of RNs. And have you been able to recruit contract labor as a result of that?
We have re-advertised. We did offer the staff development coordinator position to somebody that we had interviewed, and they declined to accept. We have not had any other candidates since then. We have engaged 2 travel agencies, so we use cross-country staffing as well as AMN, which is the contract you're referring to. Both have been unsuccessful in finding and
So that was
recruiting
my question.
anybody.
So we've entered into those agreements, and they've not placed anyone here.
We have one individual who is working nights, and she is an LPN.
Okay, but these were RNs, I think. we were
Right.
looking
And
for.
so because we
Okay.
became so desperate and we had
No,
the
no, I
3
understand.
holes,
I'm
we
just-
just asked them to expand their search.
No, I was just asking the question of have we been successful? Have they been successful in placing?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All we have under Selectmen's reports is committee reports. Does anyone have anything?
I don't.
It's been a little quiet since it was the holidays. Okay, someone might want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion